Okay, so thanks again for all of you for coming and for attending. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists. So we have for the County of Hawaii, Mayor Mitch Roth. We have our DPW Director, Stephen Jose. And our Building Division Deputy Chief, Kelly Wilson. And from our chamber and the community of voices, we have Leonard Tanaka of TNT Electric, electrical contractor. And then from engineering partners, we have Fang. And then from Yamanaka Enterprises, Garth Yamanaka. Yeah, so, as you know, from the Government Affairs group, we try to be a voice or like an advocate for what's really important to all of our members. The building permitting system process has been kind of on the top of that list. So that's why we're here today. We want to recognize that this meeting today is really all about solutions, trying to find solutions. We're not going to be here to bash anybody, but at the same time, it's really more about what can we do collectively to come up with ideas, recommendations that hopefully can improve the process. Challenges within this department has been, for years. To many administrations. So it's nothing new, but at the same time, again, here we are. We have a new electronic platform called Epic that was launched last year. Yeah. And so we have that to deal with. We have staffing shortages, as many of you know. But with that, I kind of wanted to provide the county, the mayor, Steve and Kelly, with a chance to first kind of provide us with an update. Like what is happening, what's happened in the last 6 months or so, what are some of the changes, some of the things that you folks are looking at to deal with some of the challenges that we are all facing. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor.
All right, aloha.
Aloha.
Yeah, so coming in, permitting has been one of the things that we have been working on. We really wanted to make a lot better. We are making it a lot better. When we first came in, we looked at the numbers of permits that have come through the county on a monthly basis. In 2020, the year before we came in, there was about 265 permits that were coming through the system on a monthly basis. Last year, we started up with Epic. Epic was purchased in a previous administration. We've been paying, we paid millions of dollars for it, and we've been paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep a program going that really hasn't been put into place. So we decided that we were going to make it happen. We kind of took a position that if we don't start it now, then it's not going to happen. So we're going to burn the ships at the shore and move forward. That was a difficult process. I won't lie to you. A lot of learning, a lot of things that we were promised from the vendor that weren't there, but we started making it work. And so last year, even though we put Epic in July, we still averaged about 295 permits per month. So that was up from 265. This year, we're averaging over 500 permits a month. So we're almost double where we are. We are still nowhere near where we want to be. Some of those changes came from sitting down with chambers. We met with Tanaka Chamber, who has a permitting task force. We've had several meetings with those groups. We brought in contractors and other people to talk about some of the issues. And we've been working through a lot of the problems. When we came in, there was a lot of comments made on permits where they would just fail you without telling you where you have to be. We said, look, if you're going to fail someone, we want you to put down where in the code that is so people can find that. Changing culture has probably been one of our biggest challenges. So the numbers that we have now, we're doing almost double what we were, but we have less people working. And it's not that we have less people because that's the way we want it. we're looking for people, so if anybody knows of anybody wants to be a plan reviewer or an inspector, we're desperately looking, and I know that most of your businesses are desperately looking for people, and you know how difficult it has been. But we're probably doing double the amount of permits with about half the staff. So lots of things happening. One of the things came out of a group discussion was to have a consultant come in. We recently had our consultant come in. We're waiting for that report. We're hopefully going to get it any day now. We're hoping to have that report before we came here. But before the consultant left, he made several recommendations, and the department is looking at those recommendations. Some of the things that they talked about, we've already been putting into place. I was talking to Keith Merrick about one of those things. Is, how come we're going to change the words a little bit here, Keith? We're allowing documents to go into the system that may not be completely ready, and we need to reject those plans. We're making some changes to how the documents come into the Epic system. The reason why we did that at first is because when we talked to our groups of people that we're talking to, they said it was too difficult. Well, we need to make sure that the process is moving. It's a one-stop shop where everything's moving forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Kelly, who know a lot more about this than I do. I just have been on their tail pretty regularly to make sure that we're going forward. And I gotta say, for as much as people talk about permitting, the team over there, they really are trying to do their best, and they are trying to make it a lot easier for everybody. And I really have nothing but positive things to say about them for the work that they have to do, the amount of work that they have to do. They really are trying to do their best. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Is it on now?
Yep.
Okay. So my intention, thank you, Mayor, I think you could have kept going and you could have saved me from having to even talk. You were on a roll there. So my intention is maybe just to walk you a little bit through history and then allow you the opportunity to see where we are today and talk a little bit more, as the Mayor has mentioned, about some of the things that we're looking to improve. My staff refers to it as the trifecta. Me being from the East Coast and having played hockey in Canada, called it a hat trick, right? There were three things that occurred back when we rolled out Epic. The first was we actually rolled out a new system, and as Mayor said, it had been in the works for quite some time, and folks made the decision to burn the ships, and there we are, we rolled out Epic. But at the same time, we also had to deal with expired permits. There were 40,000 permits in the system that needed to be expired. And when I say expired, meaning everybody knows, right? Contractor 3 years, owner build 5 years. And moving and migrating all of that information into a new system just didn't seem appropriate, so that had to be addressed and dealt with. And then lastly, last year, everybody remembers the new building code, the 2018 IBC or ICC codes came into being. So those three things created enough challenges all by themselves, and then here we are trying to move forward and figuring out how this is all going to work. The other thing that I also like to talk about is the change curve, right? We had, I think it's the Kubler-Ross change curve. We had a community, we had workers, employees, everybody had to get past that. Okay, initially you're in denial, and then you go into anger, and then you go into depression, and then you come around the corner finally and you start thinking about, well, gee whiz, it's not so bad. And you get into acceptance, and eventually you integrate and you thrive. I would not say we're at thriving yet. There's more work to be done, but at least it helps explain the things that went on, that the community was feeling, the things that the county workers were trying to achieve. So, quite simply, it comes down to people, process, and technology. And that's the way that I've looked at this from the beginning. And to the extent I can play the new guy card, just so everybody knows, I was deputy in May of 21. I became the acting director in June, the mayor's appointee in August, and the council approved me in September. So I've really been on the job for a month, right? I have to get some points for that. So, people, okay? There's been a host of changes within our department. Kelly Wilson here has been with the county for 10 years, and in various roles, plans examiner, architect roles. Joanne Sanamora, Kelly is now the deputy building chief. Joanne Sanamora joined us in July as the building chief. Comes from a long background working on island construction, Sonamora, sorry about that, construction work for DOT, and is brand new in her position. And she and Kelly, along with Daniel Lee, who's the building plans examiner, been with the county for a bit, structural engineer most of you recognize, have been working tirelessly to help us solve the issues that we have in front of us. But the new leadership, and I'd like to sit here and say give them a chance, they've only been at it for a couple of months, but I also know that we don't have a whole lot of time. We've got to get better, faster. Another area with people, communication, right? Communicating within our own department, with our people, communicating with the public, with the community. I know we just recently did a talk story with all the design professionals, where Kelly and Daniel Lee talked specifically about the new wind codes, the wind speeds, things like that. We need to do more of that. We need to do more training within our own department. It was starting off, it was a rough patch, getting people to accept the newness of an electronic permitting system, the changes that may have occurred with our processes. But nonetheless, also just, as I said, training with the public. Being able to provide more training and be more responsive. And one of the things we're looking at doing is trying to dedicate more staff for over the counter for questions and answers and just helping people who might get stuck. And then lastly, the mayor touched on this, staffing challenges, right? Just got out of COVID, had a number of challenges last year even with that, but staffing. We are down, if you add the sum total of permit technicians or clerks, but they're permit technicians, plans examiners, and inspectors, I think right now we're down 21 people. And that's a challenge. I think right now Kona, nobody wants to hear it, I think right now Kona's down to 2 inspectors, 2 building inspectors. We have to change our ways. We send more people from Hilo around the corners. But nonetheless, I mean, it's a challenge, and don't take it lightly. If anybody here has ever aspired to do public service, we'll take your resume. We might even hire you right on the spot. but that's been a real challenge, And then of course you get the people that are here, and you gotta train them to do things and look at things a little differently. So again, item number 1, people. All right, it's a challenge. We're working folks overtime. I think just about every Saturday we've got people doing plans examiner work, and I would say most days people are in the office until after 6 o'clock. So we're doing what we can to meet the need. It's going about as good as we can, but we still need help. The next thing, process. Some of this has come by just getting people in one place to sit down and have conversations. Hey, how can we get better? We listen to the community. What sorts of things aren't working? And I should have acknowledged, Sharice Kani is here. She's our public information officer. And I've actually asked her to help document any of the questions or follow-up types of things that come out of today's meeting, just so that we can take that and follow back up with folks. And she's dressed like a linebacker, so she's some level of protection. I'm going to be standing really close to her. Thank you. So we have been working to identify ways to streamline. One of the biggest areas of bottleneck is intake, and we're looking at ways that we can get better at doing intake. The mayor likes to call it, or I think we had a conversation about do loops. Why does everything have to go back through the permit technicians? How do we avoid that? The software will allow us to do that, right? So we can change the software, but what is the old line about consequences that occur as a result of, fixing one thing and then you create 5 more problems. We're looking at it. We've identified that as a way to improve the system so that we take the permit intake process and make it more automated. We're trying to better staff our front clerks so that people are there to answer questions. We're trying to get better at communicating with the public and providing training. Another one of our challenges is dealing with design professionals and the questions that they have. We really need to get more disciplined about working with the licensed professionals. After all, they're the folks who have their ultimate responsibility, their stamps. And as much as we'd like to work with the non-stamped people, the designers, the draftspeople, we've got to get them to go to their licensed professionals to go through things like codes and how do you do things, stuff like that. Because it takes up a lot of our staff's time, and we need to somehow figure out a way to streamline that. Checklists. There are checklists online, but we've probably not done a very good job of, at this point, of sharing them or pointing people to the checklist. If you submit an application and you go through the checklist, your application should go in and we can stop one of the ends of the do loops and just get people to get everything in right the first time. And it's not a stretch, but if an application comes in and there are no major issues, it should go through in 60 days, okay? 90 right now because we're still trying to catch up on things, but that process of spitting applications back out with comments and redos and things it's very, very tedious. And I think that is one area where the public, the community, the design professionals, and the licensed professionals can help, is get better applications. And at the same time, we can help by giving better guidance. Part of Daniel Lee's talk story with the design community was telling them this is what we're looking for when we review your permits, right? We can't tell you what to do, but we can tell you what we're looking at. And speaking of which, how many different ways can we streamline the process? Well, one of the things, and this came up out of our permitting study, was for PV. Why are we doing building permits for PV? Nobody climbs up on the roof to look at it for residential PV, so maybe we should just be doing electrical permits. So those sorts of things, there's a host of ideas that we're looking at. Again, it all comes back down to automation and using automation to the best of our ability, which is the last item is technology, right? How do we automate intake? How do we create automation that allows you to do resubmittals real time so that it doesn't go back through intake? A plans examiner has an issue, picks up the phone, gives you a call, says, hey, can you resubmit this? Simple, right? Our system doesn't allow us to do that presently. If you got a Bluebeam session open, nobody can resubmit changes until the thing is completely closed. And there might be multiple agencies working on it. Again, the resubmittal process, I think, is something that we really, really need to look at. And also providing the help that people can have so that their applications and their submittals are more in line and it can go through faster. I think that the last thing I wanted to talk about real quickly was the consultant report. James Tinner, 35, 40 years of experience, worked in Washington State, does his consulting thing now out of Idaho. But he was very good. He came in to help us to look at the process, to look at staff interaction, to look at the Epic tool, and to look at especially the interfaces between us and our customers, the community. And he had a lot of really good thoughts, and again, we're awaiting the report. But some of the things that are noteworthy, and there's activities that we're already working on around the intake. He says, your intake process is a mess, and we know that. So that's an area that we really need to work on. Your permitting software is set up to do all sorts of things automatically, yet you guys continue to do it manually. Why? Good question, you know, things that we need to work on. Training your people, training the community, working with the community. Obviously, he talks about staffing, and he recognizes that the people we have, for the most part, are really good and hardworking, but we just don't have enough of them. And one of the things he also talked about, and I come from a background working in private industry, he talked about, if folks are familiar with Six Sigma or the lean process, and taking a look at our process, how we do things, and asking ourselves, why do you do it this way, right? I remember long days in my past doing process mapping. You know, it's something that we need to do. It's something that's right in front of us, and if there are opportunities to do it better, to figure out a better way to do it, ultimately the winners are all of us, right? We get to do our jobs faster, and we get permits out faster. So I'll leave you with this. It's a challenge. I don't think the permitting process broke overnight when Mayor came. Certainly I wasn't here, so I won't take credit for that. But I think we have in front of us right now the leadership in place to really get our arms around this. You know, we can look at statistics. I think statistically we're getting better, but it's not going to be fixed or better until we get everything in place, process, staff, and get the technology tweaked a little bit. But I will tell you that the folks that are working on this are all in, extremely dedicated professionals. Yeah, you know, not everybody is Kelly Wilson, or Charisse, but we have a handful of really, really good people that are all concerned and wanting to make a difference. So I'll leave you with that. I don't know who's next. And obviously you'll have questions, and I brought Kelly here to answer all the hard questions, and I've got Charisse here to help document anything that you know might come out of the discussions that we can take back home. But thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, yeah, so the way it's going to work, I'm going to allow now for Leonard, Yan, and Garth to share a little bit from their perspectives, how they interact with the department, and some of the challenges that they see, but also more importantly, offer some suggestions, right, some recommendations that they see that may be of help. Now again, it's a kind of a good time to really think about looking at things that are a little bit out of the box, because I think from administration to administration, everybody's kind of heard the usual recommendations, and I'm not sure if it's just been a challenge implementing them, but I really hope that we can get some new ideas that are put forward today. So after that, I'll allow some time for you folks if you have any ideas or thoughts that you folks would like to share. There will be some time at the end for that as well. So with that, Leonard.
Thank you, Randy. Aloha mai kako. Aloha. Let's try that again. Aloha. Aloha. Okay, mahalo. Thank you for allowing us this time to be here and provide some mahalo to Mayor Roth and the members of the DPW. I've got a whole list, but I'll start with the lighter one there. Okay. So I'm one half of T&T Electric, for electrical contractors here from the Big Island. The other half is my better half, my wife. We've been here for 35 plus years as contractors. The other role that I play is I'm a consultant to a global renewable energy company called BIVA, RE. And amongst other projects here on the island, the Waikoloa Solar Farm is one of our projects. So I've had a lot of interactions with the mayor and his cabinet. I think one of the things that we would suggest is phasing of the permit application. So instead of coming in with one permit that covers the entire scope or scopes of the project, allow us to break it down into phases. So the first phase may be our civil grading foundation work, followed up with the next stage with part of the building, electrical, followed up by the mechanical and so forth. right now, the time span to go through that whole review process is just taking too long. So that'd be a suggestion. The other would be.
Could I respond to that question?
Sure.
One of the things I failed to talk about was we've internally decided that we call it responsible project management, but there's gotta be a little better communication up front for these large projects between the owners or the owners' reps and the county. So that we can lay out a pathway that is clearer and smoother to allow these large projects to succeed. So, point well taken. I think you know Joanne's history, myself as well. I'm a long project guy. I think it'd be something really good to implement for especially these large, especially community focused, a project like Waikoloa. I mean, what a great thing for the island. We need to figure out a way to make those go smoother. Thank you.
Totally agree. Thank you, Steve. The second would be time limitations for the department reviews. So if we can come together and establish, planning department, Zendo, X amount of days to do your review and your approval. And if those time limitations are not met, they move on to the next department. I think you mentioned this, Steve, and I think training for the staff is really important. When you look at especially the building trades and electrical especially, it's so dynamic. The technology changes from year to year. So what we're installing today will definitely be obsolete next year. So as plans are being submitted, the reviewers may not be in sync with what's happening in the industry. So perhaps providing some motivation by training off island as incentives for productivity. So you give them an opportunity to learn, but then incentive to do better and learn at the same time. This is great, and I applaud the chamber for putting this together. It's bringing some of the stakeholders together along with mayor and the county, but forming an advisory group that could continually provide input to the process, what's been improving, what needs work, and so forth. The next item that I have is, I think when we look at the process, it starts with our professional licensed engineers and architects. Steve, you alluded to that. I think we need to provide more credence to those individuals that have the education, the background, and the experience. So as they design for public safety, as well as code compliance, that we rely on their expertise. And I'm looking at you.
It's all my fault.
Give them the credence so as the plans come in, I wouldn't say automatic, but as they meet certain requirements and qualifications, that it should flow a lot faster. I just happened to be talking with one of our council members, and he informed me that there's a bill that's been introduced. I don't know if you know that, Mayor, but Bill 238. This is very, very new. It was introduced to the council last week. I think it goes through first reading either end of this month or next month. What the bill says, and this is a temporary, is to help with the backlog that you're having. If plans are submitted and they're done by a licensed professional engineer or architect, then they should go through the process. I encourage Mayor and Steve and Kelly to support that. I figured he would say something like this.
Yeah, Kelly, I'll start.
A lot of our backlog, a lot of our backlog are submitted by draftspeople, and we have multiple plan stampers on this island. They don't even
Hold the
look at
mic
plans.
closer.
They don't even look at the plans. We just stamp the plans and let them come in. One that comes in, Oahu, regularly, has made the comment, I don't have to do that, that's a county responsibility to see if it's correct. So if we get plans that are actually reviewed by the design professionals to the full extent, they'll go right through. We have no issues with those. But when we have these that are being dumped on us, that are not being even reviewed by the design professional, that slows down.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So this, oh, Mayor,
Go ahead.
this bill supposedly is good for 180 days, so it's a temporary pilot to see if it will help with the department. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've actually put this in front of our directors and our staff, and there's still some concerns with what's in the law and the state laws. And, you know, they have their licenses are also on the line, so this is something that I've looked at several times to try to make happen, but.
Thank you. And the last thing that I have, sorry, Randy. Because we work with the different counties here on the island, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai, we are exposed to the different policies and procedures that are used around the state. I'd like to suggest that we implement and adopt or mirror what Maui County is doing when it comes to utility scale projects. I don't know if you're familiar, well, we mentioned this, all that.
Right, but this has to do what they have in their code, so it will have to be a code change.
Right. So what it is, for everybody's knowledge, is if you're building on the island of Maui and you're building a utility scale project where electricity is being generated and sold directly to a public utility like Miko or now Hiko, then Maui County exempts you from the electrical permits. Totally exempt. Which makes sense because the public is never exposed to, or never can have access unless you're authorized to do so, to get on site. So I would suggest that. And some of my colleagues had mentioned that perhaps we should expand that because of the reasons that I just stated. Not only exempt the electrical permit, but building, mechanical, structural. However, we would keep the grading permit under the county purview because the grading could affect, you know, the adjoining properties. So that's all I have there, Randy.
Thanks, Leonard. Okay, thanks, Leonard. Any response to his last recommendation?
I think the last recommendation really has to be a code change. We've actually had conversations about this, and looking at getting the language from Maui to look at that over here.
Randy, I have some comments, but do you
Yeah.
want to wait till the rest
Yeah,
of the panel?
you'll wait
finish?
till,
Yeah.
the end, thanks. Okay, let's move over to Yen.
Turn it on. Let's roll.
Hi, my name is Yen Wen Fang. I am a licensed civil and structural engineer and been practicing on the island for 30 years now. And so I've seen, I submit building permit from 30 years ago and definitely see a whole lot of change. How the building permit was processed. I would say, in the last 10 years, it's been, getting tougher and tougher. 30 years ago, things are loosey, and I think a lot of people agree with that, and you can get a permit in a couple weeks. Not that it's good. I'm not saying that's good because a lot of things not reviewed. But today it's definitely being reviewed down to the spelling. So I would like to suggest this is the building code has many chapters, and what do we as a county or the community, what do we like the county to focus on? Generally, I would think is structural safety, life safety, fire safety, and everything else is more of a convenience. It's definitely not to just delete them, but is something for the design professional to just manage and make the decision what is necessary. So if we just focus on those areas, the fire safety, the life safety, the structural safety, then, the review time will be cut down by a lot. Because that's half of the code book is now not being, enforced. Or not, I'm not saying not enforced, but it's, doesn't have to be called out page by page. And there's a lot of area that is silent in the code because, we all know, the code is made to, it's made for a certain type of structures that is commonly seen. A lot of things are not that common, or the design never will fit it. A structure will never fit just a code. You need to let the design professional decide what is good enough. And if we can do that, I think there is a lot of this cut back and forth can be eliminated.
No, I don't disagree with you at all. I think there's opportunities here to, as you say, focus on life safety. We've talked about streamlining the process. I mentioned earlier about PV and being able to filter permits that come in and get these quick ones done that, that just can get reviewed quickly. Am I allowed to talk about our 1015?
Sure.
We're working on a process where single family, slab on grade, 3-bedroom house, 2-bath, basically giving our plans reviewers a checklist of 10 to 15 items, get the thing in, get it processed, and get it out. It seems to be a bulk of the applications that come in, and it should be pretty simple. But again, simplifying and trying to focus on the things that you're talking about. Life safety is really what we should be focusing on. Thank you.
And yeah, I just want to throw one other thing. One of the things that we started from the very beginning is, if it's not in the code, they shouldn't be dinging you on that. So there's nothing in the code that says it has to be spelled a certain way, for example. And we had some issues. I haven't seen them recently.
Because we fixed it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I haven't seen it recently because we fixed it. Where we would have some of the reviewers, trying to out-engineer the engineers. And so if you're seeing that, we want to know about that because that should not be happening anymore.
And one last thing on that is also, as I mentioned, and maybe did not articulate particularly well, is getting the plans examiners to pick up the phone and call the design licensed person and say, this doesn't look right, being able to annotate, cloud, whatever we can do with the plans, and resolve it that way rather than kicking it back out for another cycle. We're working on it.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, I definitely really happy to hear that. And I would say since the Epic system started, it was definitely a struggle at the beginning, but certain things already gotten better. The intake is for one is definitely got better. Before the Epic, it takes a month to get the front desk to take it in because it's a spelling error. The TMK was off. The TMK wasn't wrong. It was just not written in a 1 digit, 3 digit format. Things like that, and it just goes in, comes back right back out, goes in, comes right back out. It just take a month just to have the intake. That's not a problem anymore, and the planning department definitely is doing a great job on controlling what is the procedure. there's a lot of improvement in there. Not that it's it's great yet, but they definitely have improved quite a bit. The other thing that I would like to suggest is using at the building review level, using conditional approval or recommendations at the end, rather than rejecting it even for the last time to get it all fixed. You can just, as a conditional approval and say, okay, you need to follow through this A, B, and C. And you get the permit now, but you need to follow through on it. That saves a lot of time, because usually the last few comments, sometimes it's, we don't know what it's asking of us, or we just don't agree with the review comment, and so if it's a conditional, we might want to go back and ask that to be waived, or it's we will just follow through. A lot of times, yes, we'll follow through, and that's it. And then you can have some recommendations or suggestions to design professionals to say, look at this. I think you're missing something, and you don't need to hold back on the permit. As a responsible design professional, we will look at it. It's not like I'm gonna let something through with my name on it, and later on, it's coming right back at me. So, yeah, that would be my response.
Two quick comments. First, the permit software will allow us to get perfectly submitted applications every single time. It's just not programmed to do that presently. And I think part of that might go back to when the original public outreach was done prior to bringing the application online or before selecting it. But we have the ability to say, here, box 1, okay, oh, you forgot a colon on your TMK, you can't go on to box 2. We have the ability to do that, and it's something we're very seriously looking at doing. And what that does is, then the application is just done, and there is no back and forth with the clerks. That was my first point. And the second point is, I agree with you on just making marks on plans, but we have to be very careful that we don't put an undue amount of burden on our inspectors. So we can't ask them to go out and be plans examiners. Whatever they're going out to inspect has to be a product that can be inspected instead of trying to do interpretation. But I agree with both of those.
Okay, sorry about that. So now, yeah, let's move on to Garth, and then following Garth and feedback, then we'll have time to take some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Randy. Aloha, everyone. Garth, Yamanaka, appraiser, real estate agent, property manager. And so my experience with Epic has mostly been online. And the first item I want to bring up is just basically the public records data. And as an appraiser and real estate agent, we look up that to determine what's permitted and not permitted in a property. And so the impacts would be, as an appraiser, the lenders want to know, and they want to lend on what's permitted. And so that's a point where having that information would be much better and much more helpful in the real estate transactions. And on the real estate side, for disclosure, for buyers and sellers, knowing what they're working with. So the previous system that was run through the finance department was a link from Public Works. And that worked pretty well. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was sufficient. So I would ask and maybe suggest, if possible, to bring that back. Because what we currently have through the Epic, it seems incomplete and not very sufficient to figure out what is permitted or not.
So, you're talking about when there's open permits and closed permits and things like that.
Yeah, the previous system would have whether it's open, complete, when it was inspected, and then it would have a good description of what was under the permit.
Okay, and I think we just did this with the West Hawaii Realtors, and correct me if I'm not, if I'm incorrect, Sharice, there is a way to get to that information. And, I guess one of the things we can do, we did it with them, I don't know if you have it written out, Sharice, or we can do it, maybe get the East Hawaii group to do the same things.
Right. We do have a system in place already that, there was a system upgrade that transferred information over. That was the biggest thing that happened. So, once that information got over, you guys could get the information you wanted, like the 2-bedroom, 1 bath, instead of a 1-bedroom, 1 garage. That was kind of what the issue was. So I believe we did a write-up for West Hawaii that we can provide for you as well.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. So the next item that I was looking through happened to do with the permits issued data. And, you know, it looks like how you were stating before that the amount of permits are consistent with the prior years. The amount of fees being brought in it looks like it maybe doubled from previous years as well. And so it seems like the issue here is really the timing on being able to put the permits out. But, you know, I was curious as well if the additional funds being brought in could be used to help with the training of people, hiring people, and maybe not necessarily plan reviewers, because it sounds like that is very hard to find at this time, but maybe scopes of work that maybe doesn't require that type of skill set, maybe more entry level, but the type of jobs I think could help with the timing and efficiency would be responding to the community in terms of if there's an error, creating some type of software that notifies people there's an error in your application. Other things that we're looking at, you know, people who are coming in to complain, you know, you'd have people available so you're not taking away from the reviewers and people like that would be able to do it. Creating a timeline, you know, if people had a timeline, a reasonable timeline when these permits would be going through it would save a lot of, you know, because when you know, one of the examples that I come across in the property management side is, you know, you have a tenant looking to sign a lease, and they sign a lease, but they intended to do some work that requires a permit. So now they're under lease, but their permit might not be done for another 9 months, so in the meantime, they're locked into a lease with no clear timeline on when it will be done, and they have to be paying this lease rent, and, you know, it really puts them in a bad position to start their business. And so I think something like a timeline would be a reasonable expectation. Another thing I was thinking about was maybe a FAQ type of document, you know, the most, whatever comes up that most affects people, you know, something that people could look towards to see, to make sure that they're gonna be able to submit it correctly. Interpretation, you know, if there's points that, you know, like for the professionals and for the reviewers, you know, there's different interpretations going on. Maybe there's some type of information that can be shared that would clear that kind of stuff up. So that's the main things
So let me try to get a couple of them. The FAQ, there is an FAQ on the system, on the computer. So if you go out there, we do have that information out there. We're also trying to be as transparent as possible, and so we're trying to put timelines up. So if you go to the County of Hawaii Building Department, on their webpage, if you go to Epic, there's a list of where things are, how fast things are moving. What I use every month is I go to the permit review process, also on the building department, and it has since like 2009 I think 5 or 2009, it has all the monthly permits that were offered. If you go to the last page of any month or at the end of the year, the reason I can tell you is I've been physically going in and taking those numbers down. How many are happening? What's happening here? What's happening here? And so I'm measuring and going each month and looking at how many are being done. So that is also out there for the public to look at. You said one more that what was the last point you're making?
Timeline, interpretation.
Interpretation. So one of the things that we've started doing, I know Daniel Lee has done some of these things for the common engineering plans, for example, like lanais and things like that. They're putting samples up there so people don't have to guess. The common mistakes, they're going back and they're able to look and say, okay, this is what they're asking for. We're not designing it for them, but we have samples that we've started doing, and we continue to add to that library. So there's quite a bit. And just as a recommendation back, it may be good to do for the chambers or for especially the realtors. We just did a training with the design professionals. If there's a group that we should be coming and talking to, we can do it by Zoom and put everything up there. Really happy to do that because a lot of these things, they're there, but we may not have been doing a great enough job in just explaining, here's where you find these things. But we're trying to get most of those things out there right now. But thank you very much.
Just one thing, the details that the mayor touched on, we see those all the time, just cut and paste. They're right on the county webpage. They can pull them right off. They add them to their plans. They're accepted right across the board.
And that's something that we started more recently. When we came in, I actually had a meeting, and the position formerly was, it's not our job to design these things, but if we're going to help people thrive and succeed, help them get there. So there's a lot of these little things that we've been putting in place to make that happen.
Right, thank you. So we have a few minutes to take some questions from the audience. I know Hugh is never short on
You're
questions.
gonna make me wait till the end, I know.
Okay, Hugh.
Do you want to ask anybody else before we ask you?
This won't take long. I just want to comment on the evolution of the building permit review process. I've been around in the engineering area, so I've observed it. In the beginning, the building permits were not as numerous, but they went through. And the difference is the design professionals are really responsible. When they snapped the plan, they snapped it and they knew the codes so that you wouldn't have as many plans caught for missing items or codes not addressed. Then we went through a period of maybe a little irresponsibility on the design professionals. Just stamping them, they say, oh, the building department's gonna check it. But here again, you have missing items, and that's what slows down your plans. And then, hopefully there's a return to that, because the codes continually change, and my observation over my career is that you have design professionals that are not keeping up to date with these things. And then for the audience's information, you have another problem here with design professionals who don't want to stamp these plans because of liability exposure, especially for homeowners. Those are small, and I believe condominiums still fall in that with their multiple owners. Designers don't want to touch those. They're dealing with too much exposure liability-wise. Anyway, that's my comment. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for letting me talk, Randy. You want me to go on?
No, that's it, Hugh. You may leave now. Any other questions? Okay, Misty.
I really don't need a mic, but, okay. I do have a question in regards to if there's anything or any plans in the works, and I understand that you folks are short-staffed, but since permits have been an issue for a while, right? It didn't break overnight, but it's been, so you have a lot of these outliers that just decided to move on without approval, right? So unpermitted structures, all of that. So now a lot of those are coming to fruition, especially with, you know, somebody out there going and reporting every Tom, Dick, and Harry that has an unpermitted addition to their house or whatever the case may be. Has there been any thought about designating kind of a liaison or a person that can help those individuals work through that process? Because right now what we're seeing is they're just being told, you know, maybe they can have an inspection and it was an oversight and then it's a quick thing to go. But a lot of these folks now are having to rip down lanais or, you know, rebuild things, and it's a really cumbersome process to go through, especially when you're in the middle of escrow. So that becomes an issue. So is there any kind of process to kind of help those individuals individually so they don't clog up the already clogged up system?
So this will be a double team response between Kelly and I. Yeah, we received that, and they go into a couple different categories as well. I mean, it is possible to get an as-built permit after the fact by having a professional, you know, inspect it and stamp it. We've also run into situations where people had permits that have expired and they failed to get inspections. So we made some exceptions for that, and I would tell you that every one of those is a case-by-case basis. But it's difficult when you've got a permit that might have been pulled in the 90s and they didn't do a bunch of inspections and the codes changed and everything else. So I don't want to make a flash announcement here. We're not heartless. We would very much like to try to work with people, but then there are issues that just cannot be resolved easily just because of the age of some of these structures. So, Kelly?
And with the as-built, to find a design professional that's willing to take the liability on, that is a major issue. As we see, using a lot of these residences that come through, the owner never knows who the architect is. They only know their draftsperson. They've never met or even been introduced to their architect or structural engineer of record. So there's no contract, there's no liability on the architect or engineer to perform correctly. And that's a major issue. If we'd see that, if they want to have a bill like that, we'd be requesting that they provide a signed contract and a copy of their errors and omission insurance so that everybody's covered on that one. Thank you.
Okay, I think Tyler had questions.
Yeah, hello, thanks for letting me talk. Tyler with Dickinson Contracting. Is the mic working? Good.
Turn it on.
Oh, now it's on. Yeah. So anyways, I think that what Leonard and Yen and Hugh back here kind of all said was giving credence to the design professionals. And I get where Kelly's coming from. There's 3 known design professionals in Kona that just stamp plans. Those guys probably shouldn't even have a license, honestly, but they are clogging the system up, and it's a big issue. So we need to figure out a way to go after them so that everyone that's doing it correctly can actually get their plans through. But with credence to design professionals, we've got a big home we're working on right now on the west side of the island, and we just failed our inspection because we didn't meet the Hawaii County Code 5-5-1-B, which pretty much essentially says that any change that you make to your plans after the permit process is approved, you can be failed if you make minor changes or pretty much any change to that structure. So what we did was we furred down the ceiling 6 inches so that it would look nice and flat for our owners. We had steel TGI joists coming into our garage. We furred the middle section down so it'd be a nice flat transition. We got failed for that, and we are moving on with the process, but like Misty talking about clogging up the system, we are now being required to submit a revision to the county that's gonna clog up the system, and it's like, that's not needed. I've got a letter from my structural engineer that says pretty much what Dickinson Contracting did was under my supervision. The design loads have all been tested, calculated, we've provided a letter, but the county wants us to provide an additional set of plans with a revision and, you know, pretty much clog the system. So I think that's a really easy one to just, you know, and I do realize that some revisions need to, you know, take place, but something very simple like that seems a little bit crazy, honestly, so.
Thanks, Tyler. Is that, do you want a response, or you good?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Kelly would be the one to respond to that. Kelly was not the one that threw it back at us, but.
I didn't throw it back, but I always ask for the revision, or the inspectors call for the inspection because it's not for the plans. And we don't know for sure, when the inspector's out there, there's times when the design professional of record is not even aware of it. That is simply, not necessarily in this case, but we do have cases where they make changes without the design professional being aware of it. There's times when the design professional is not even aware that his stamp is on a set of plans.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, we do have we had the design professional come out. He wrote a letter, he did all the calculations, you know, referring down the ceiling 6 inches. And, but we're still required to bring we should be able to take that paperwork to the county and be like, hey, here's the documentation, this is exactly what's happening here, design professional's aware of it, and it should be approved, you know.
Not to get stuck in one plan, but, you know, my recommendation is probably bring that up to the building chief's attention, you know, and then maybe Steve as well. And because it sounds like something that should be able to be worked out.
It seems pretty simple, honestly. So my example to our building inspector was, I said, okay, if I have a glue lamp on the front of my lanai that's 15 inches, and I have two return glue lamps that are 12 inches, so your plane of view is not the same. So if I prefer those two glue lamps that are 12 inches down with two 2x4s to net a nice clean line all the way around, I said, you guys can reject me for that? And he goes, yeah, we can make you do a revision for it.
Okay, well, we'll get one last
My-
response.
Yeah, my fast response is Sharice has noted that, and let's look at a way that we can take care of that, because it's not just for you, it's lots of people, I'm sure, run into the same.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of happening across the board, so anyways.
Well, thank you, everybody. So we've kind of come to the end of our time. We've actually gone over a little bit. I wanted to again thank all of you for coming today, and also for our panelists, Mayor and his team, Leonard, Yen and Garth for being a part of this as well. And thank you again. I know they probably hang around for a little bit too, so if you need to come and ask a question, they'll be around for a few minutes, but just thank you very much. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Thanks, Randy. I just want to thank everybody for coming out. This is really valuable for us to hear this kind of stuff. So don't be afraid to reach out and set one of these up again in the future. And we are in the process of getting better, and we will be there.
Thank you, everybody.